What screams, this person peaked in high school? Story 1. How do you know if someone peaked in high school? Well, don't worry, they'll tell you. I graduated in 2005 and one day I found myself sitting in a tire shop waiting for my truck to get serviced. As I passed the time, an employee slightly older than me approached, and out of the blue he asked if I played football in high school. Curious about where this conversation was headed, I replied affirmatively, but added that I wasn't exactly a star player. He wanted to know which school I attended, and I told him. Without missing a beat, he launched into his own high school glory days. He regaled me with tales of him being all-conference and meticulously recounted all of his high school achievements. I never initiated the discussion, so I sat there baffled, wondering why this nearly 40-year-old out-of-shape tire shop supervisor felt the need to share his high school triumphs with me. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, he bid me a good day and walked away. It was a truly bizarre encounter. The closest comparison I could draw was to the character Dan from the movie Waiting. That's the kind of vibe he gave off. That's how I knew he had peaked in high school. On another note, I have this uncle, well, more of an uncle-in-law if you want to be technical. He had a peculiar habit of telling anyone who would listen that he was the valedictorian of a school and had achieved a perfect SAT score. Even as a young kid, I couldn't help but wonder, this guy's a college graduate with a career, a wife, and kids, and he's like 2 decades into the real world. Why is he still bragging about how smart he was in high school at a backyard barbecue? Man, I gotta say, there's nothing worse than a person who acts like high school was the peak of human existence. If I had a time machine, I'd send them back and let a quantum glitch keep them reliving their glory days forever. Story 2. They want to organize high school reunions every 5 years, or simply, they want to organize a high school reunion. I mean, social media has made high school reunions mostly pointless, and people say bad things on social media about those who can't or won't come. When they organized one, I ditched them. Sorry, but it was a 6-hour drive and I haven't spoken to anyone from high school in over 20 years. The feeling was like, once upon a time, your last day of high school was literally the last time you ever saw or heard from most of your classmates, unless you went to a reunion. Now we have to hear from them every time someone decides to take up an MLM scheme. I don't want your knives, ugly leggings, or supplements. Please just leave me alone. My brother went to homecoming during his freshman year. That was the only time he ever attended a school function. Nothing bad happened, he just didn't care for it. He skipped prom, he skipped the 5-year reunion, he skipped the 10-year reunion, he skipped the 15-year reunion, and he's about to skip the 20-year reunion. My father-in-law was the same way. He just went back for his 50th reunion, though. My wife and I were perplexed and asked why, especially since it involved a ton of driving. He chuckled and said, I want to see which one of those rat bastards have outlived, and I'm buying a motorcycle up there and bringing it home. Story 3. Anyone who bullies other adults as if they were still in high school, or people who used to rough up others and call it the good old days, really irks me. And those who proudly list School of Hard Knocks under college or university in their Facebook profile, along with claiming to be fluent in sarcasm, annoy me more than anything. Just admit that you're a jerk that no one likes. It gets under my skin because it screams, I've structured my personality around being funny, but I only come up with lame, obvious jokes. If fluent in sarcasm is your go-to I'm funny tagline with prep time, then conversations with you are likely to be an absolute chore. And then there's the president or CEO at None of Your Business Incorporated crowd. Come on, let's be real. Oh, and self-employed when they're clearly not self-employed, more like barely employed. The profile pic is usually 5 to 10 years old, taken from a poor angle, complete with dark sunglasses. But perhaps the worst one is when someone proudly declares they work at the Krusty Krab. Grow up, will you? Story 4. I used to work with a guy we affectionately called Roid Rage. He was incredibly muscular and very masculine, and he never let anyone forget it. One day I found myself sitting next to him in the break room, and true to his form, he initiated a conversation about attending an award ceremony for his son who had achieved something remarkable in football. I thought I'd offer some positivity and said, Well, that was nice of you to go and support him. Nice? He scoffed. It was freaking sad, man. That used to be me. Now I'm the old guy in the room who has to watch someone else win something I should have had. All I could think was, what a loser. Instead of being happy for his son and proud of his achievements, he had to make it all about himself. Initially, I was astounded by people like him. These are the folks who live vicariously through their kids, unable to appreciate their children's accomplishments for what they are. I mean, being proud of your kids and their achievements is a good thing, right? But individuals like the one you're talking about turned out to be more common than I ever expected. And I didn't really discover this until I was in my 30s. I mean, come on, you're not dead, dude. There's still so much you can do and be proud of. Why on earth would this guy envy a high school award? Those are meant for children. Every now and then I have nightmares where I have to attend high school again as an adult due to some bizarre technicality, experiencing all the embarrassment that comes with it. But this dude, he seems to have fantasies about it.
Oh my God! What is that?
If you two are asking what that is, it's the sponsor of today's video, Rufus Rugs. We've been hard at work, creating the best quality and premium hand-tufted rugs money can buy. Now there's a chance you own a carpet that looks something like this. Let's just be real, it's time for an upgrade. And luckily for you, me and the boys from Rufus Rugs are at your service. We don't make those average cheap quality looking rugs. Nope, not gonna happen. Each one is handcrafted to perfection. No shortcuts, no robot assembly lines, and no dropshipping BS. Just pure rug grind. Whether you love anime, sports, cars, or anything else you can think of, we can turn it into a rug. So click the first link in the description and have your custom idea come to life. Story 5. Still acting like a typical mean girl when they're damn near or past 30. About 5 years ago, I ran into one of the more popular girls in school at the mall. She was a cashier, and when I went up with my purchases, she actually said, "Ew, aren't you that nerd from school?" I literally just said hi. After that, I didn't say anything, just paid and left. I felt bad for her more than anything else because she clearly peaked in high school. That is 100% one of the moments where I'd be so taken aback by the lack of self-awareness of someone that I'd be speechless. But later I'd come up with a perfect comeback that I'll never get to use. And when I was active on Facebook years ago, someone started a sort of reunion group. I was the nerd in the scenario. One of the high school gals who was incredibly cruel found someone to marry her and ended up a stay-at-home mom who spent all day spouting bitter hate towards everyone while complaining about her own kids getting bullied at school. She gained a lot of weight, and I'm fat myself, but she was even bigger than I. This gal would make the nastiest comments on my pictures, including my weight, which was hilarious considering her own size, insult my job and my husband and talk about how I was still the ugly nerd. The moderators refused to kick her off despite this. She posted similar vile shit in other people's posts too. So I ended up reporting her to Facebook security for cyberbullying just because and left the group. Now that our kids are in school, she got a job in the public schools. She's probably bullying other parents now for all I know. Story 6. Still going to every high school football game and sitting in the students section, these parents are relentless. Living their dreams through their kids, it's a scene we witness all too often in my town. They're trying to relive it all through the eyes of their children, and honestly, it's a bit much. It makes me roll my eyes quite a bit. Don't get me wrong, my kids had a great time in high school. It was a joy to watch them dance, participate in the band, and play football, but I never took it to the extreme as if their experiences were my own. I wanted the best for them, of course, and hoped for good things, but I also made sure they were prepared for disappointments. Another crazy memory stands out from my son's senior year. His football team, which had been winning consistently for 5 years prior and continued to do so for 3 years after, unexpectedly lost the state championship game. I witnessed a father berate his own child because, in his eyes, it was the kid's job to win it. What the actual heck? My son was crushed, but he bounced back and went on to achieve remarkable things. He does look back at that loss with a sense of regret, but it was also a valuable life lesson. Having played football for 7 years, I've seen countless parents like the one I mentioned. The ones who scream, "Way to go, Jason! You dropped the freaking ball! Get in the freaking car!" It's no surprise that Jason, despite his talents, feels immense pressure to perform well. I just can't stand those kinds of parents. Story 7. One of my high school teachers explained it like this. Don't let anyone tell you that these are the best years of your life. It's a lie. Your high school years actually suck. If you go to college, you'll make friends with people based on shared values, not just because you've been in the same school since grade 1. You'll have more fulfilling relationships, more freedom, and as the years go by, more discretionary income. And just when you think it can't get any better, your children grow up, move out of the house, and leave you with the freedom, time, and money to do damn near anything you want. But you'll never be this thin or pretty again, so enjoy that. Now about the "you'll never be this thin or pretty again with that effort" line, I know a few people, both male and female, who actually looked better a few years later. For some it was finding their style, for others it was getting fit, and some just grew into their features. But for a select few, it was a mental transformation. They discovered their confidence and began radiating good vibes. One person went from being a bit of a dork to looking like a model. He hit the gym, revamped his wardrobe to suit him, and continued his passion for learning about everything under the sun. He's my go-to guy for discussions on primate studies, military history and strategy, geopolitics, climate studies, farming, and Japanese culture. In return, I help him out with his computer woes. High school is like the training ground for those awkward growing up years where we embarrass ourselves and discover what we don't want to become as adults. Are you tired of that overrated high school nostalgia? Brighten your day by giving this video a like and hitting that subscribe button. Story 8. My ex-stepmother was something else. She had never let you forget she was a high school cheerleader and even won a beauty pageant in our tiny town of about 500 people. I swear, the last time I saw her, in her mid-40s mind you, she was still going on about it. It was like Miss Baltimore Crabs from that movie, you know? She'd say stuff like, "I was Miss Soft Crab in 1945 and that title was handed to me on a silver platter. I worked for it. Now 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. And then there's my best friend. Can you believe he married a woman just like my ex-stepmother? I mean, seriously. Being the head of the cheerleading squad, winning both homecoming queen and prom queen, it's like her favorite conversation topics. She's even got this display case full of tiaras she's won. And get this, she's got one she keeps in her car, and she wears it while driving because she's the queen of the road. Seriously, I don't make this stuff up. Her personality is like she's stuck in time. A prom queen who had a short stint in modeling after high school, had a kid and never got over it. So I've told my best friend 1,000,000 times, hey, stick with it, as long as you're happy. Story 9. For the next 30 years, they kept insisting that they would have been state champions if only the coach had put them in the game. You see, this guy once scored 4 touchdowns in a single game at Polk High. But then life took a bit of a turn. He became a shoe salesman for large ladies. Yep, you heard that right. He'd still go on and on about those 4 touchdowns from high school over 20 years later. Meanwhile, he's selling shoes. He had a 9-to-5 job where, honestly, he mostly just insulted plus-sized women. His wife, on the other hand, had an insatiable drive for intimacy. They had 2 kids, a gigantic house, but let's face it, an ugly car. He was the president of some club or another. You could say he was a bit of a Chad, and all he ever talked about were his glory days. You know, glory days, well, they'll pass you by, glory days in the wink of a young girl's eye. Glory days, glory days. Oh, and he was a master at reposting that one notable high school moment on social media. You'd see it pop up like, hey, want to watch me throw a football over those mountains? 4 touchdowns in 1 game. Story 10. In my experience, it's those folks who can't stop talking about their high school days as if they happened yesterday. I mean, constantly. I had an ex who would regale me with these wild stories. I'd ask, when did all of this go down? She'd casually respond, sophomore year. And here we are well into our mid-20s. Over time, it became evident that high school was the pinnacle of her life, and it might very well stay that way, given her lack of ambition beyond those years. Now me, I had one standout year in high school, and every now and then, I'll reminisce about it, but it's not something that occupies my thoughts regularly. Most of my school memories are a hazy blend of unpleasant emotions and the occasional cringeworthy moment that haunts me just as I'm trying to drift off to sleep. You know, people who claim high school is the best time of your life, I think they're really missing the mark. It's not because high school is inherently amazing, it's more about the fact that it's the period in life where you have maximum freedom and minimal responsibility. You get your driver's license, experience your first serious relationship, venture out without parental guidance, and so on. Your biggest worries are maintaining decent grades and perhaps working a lousy part-time job. College keeps the freedom but starts to introduce responsibilities. Then once you have a career and a family, those responsibilities take center stage, and you start longing for the good old days. It's not high school you miss, it's the freedom and the carefree nature of those times. I'm turning 40 next month, and let me tell you, my 30s have been the best decade of my life by far. Sure, sometimes I wish things were as simple as they were back then, but there's no way I'd want to turn back the clock. Story 11. Hey there, ever heard someone say, do you want to be your own boss babe while working from home? And it turns out it's just a pyramid scheme? It's funny, I never thought about pyramid scheme folks as people who peaked in high school, but it totally makes sense. Case in point, this girl I know who's jumped into probably a dozen MLMs in the last few years and still acts like a teenager. You know, those people who try to rope you into selling body wraps and whatnot through MLM schemes. Then there are the ones who proudly slap a Salt Life decal in their car, even though they live nowhere near the ocean or even a salt mine. I never even considered that as a lifestyle choice. Honestly, for me, any level of involvement in an MLM scheme is usually a sign that they hit their peak in high school. Seriously, who falls for that legal version of a Ponzi scheme these days? Only teenagers and those adult babies seem to buy the get-rich-quick fantasy. Story 12. If someone's in their 30s to 40s and they're rocking their high school letter jacket outside of something like a high school reunion, where it's just barely appropriate, they're still bragging about their high school GPA or any achievement from those days. They're sporting their high school class ring outside of a reunion or graduation ceremony. Now, high school can be a blast and it's okay to reminisce, like how at my high school they had this crazy tradition where they made some random freshman swallow a whole goldfish as a school-sanctioned event. But if high school still defines who you are, well, I hate to break it to you, but you might have peaked back in those high school days. Story 13. You know, anyone who genuinely and unironically claims that high school was the best time of their life. I didn't even feel like I was a fully formed person until after college. And let me tell you, my late 20s and early 30s have been 1,000 times better than anything that came before. I had this teacher back in the day who used to say, these are the best years of your lives. But honestly, ever since I graduated in 2003, every single year has been an improvement over those school years that, to be honest, I'd rather forget. High school, it was just, well, let's say it was far from enjoyable. It was downright awful and seriously depressing. I had to work as a janitor during grades 11 and 12 just to pay the rent. And you know what? I ended up dropping out with only one class left to pursue a union construction job. Well, life has a funny way of turning around. I've worked hard to get myself to a point where I could go back to university and pursue an engineering degree. It wasn't easy, but it's all been worth it to escape the shadow of those high school years. Story 14. Years ago, I had this conversation with a drinking buddy at a bar. The guy just wouldn't stop talking about the one that got away. He went on and on about how perfect she was, their incredible chemistry, how it all felt so natural, and how he hadn't felt that way about any girl since. You know, the whole shebang. He was feeling pretty sorry for himself and had zero interest in meeting anyone else because, in his mind, no one could ever compare. So, being curious, I asked, how long ago did you move away? He paused, took a sip of his drink, and then burst out laughing. 8th grade, he said. No, guys, no hate, please. You know, sometimes it's really tough to move on from that lost love that had us crying, soaking our bedsheets way back in those ancient times. Story 15. This is weird, because I've grown a lot as a person since high school, but life has been unkind to me since then. I look at high school and realize that life was the most stable and kind to me back then. I think the difference is that peaking in high school denotes not moving on and living in the past, while school being the best, most stable time of your life is more about the drawbacks of responsibility, not the rejection of them. It's also uncanny because it's very similar to my mom's experience. She loved her time in high school because she had a great group of friends. Her 20s, from what I understand, massively sucked. She was still telling stories about working at the movie theater when she was in her 40s. She honestly peaked in her 50s, though. She did a lot of cool stuff and actually became a substitute teacher and positively impacted the lives of so many people. I think she was stuck on the magic of having her whole life ahead of her, not just being a big fish in a small pond, and working with kids gave her an opportunity to be a part of that magic again, but supporting others through it. Her funeral was packed. So many kids who are now grown will never forget her. They outnumbered her high school friends significantly. Story 16. I occasionally reminisce about my high school wrestling days. Back then, it was the one shining light during my high school years. My best friend and I, who had been inseparable since we were 4 years old, were both part of the wrestling team and also happened to be training partners. We approached it with sheer joy, never taking things too seriously. It was all about the pure thrill of grappling with each other during practice and still remaining the best of friends once practice ended. But then, he passed away at the young age of 24. It's been nearly 7 long years without him, and my world has never been the same. Sharing stories about those days is like keeping his memory alive. In high school, I wasn't the popular kid. Never attended prom and never even had a girlfriend. However, those days in the wrestling team are some of the few precious memories I have left of him. Before his passing, he was going through a tough period, spiraling downward, but I refuse to remember him that way. That's not who he truly was. Story 17. My sister is one of those people, the ones who can be incredibly frustrating at times. She said to me one time, "You were never any good at math." So I fired back, "I have a degree in robotics, a field that practically swims in math." She smirked and replied, "Well, I took a high school math class that actually earned me college credit, so I think that's better than your degree." I rolled my eyes and said, "You're comparing a single high school class to an entire college degree, sis." Then she tried to shrug it off with, "I earned college credit." I chuckled and said, "Maybe, at most 3 credit hours, and you'd still need to find a school that accept those credits. Plus you graduated over 20 years ago. What you've got there is pretty much pointless." "Hey, somebody call the paramedics. We've got a 3rd-degree burn from a savage roast here." Seems like many of us find it annoying when people can't move on. But hey, admit it, high school gave us some great memories. If you like this, you'll love, "What's the most awkward thing you've seen at a high school reunion?" Story 2 is hilarious. See you later.